The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, which is the kind of day nothing important is supposed to happen. Nneka almost didn't open it. She was standing in the kitchen of her sister's apartment in Decatur, Georgia, wearing the same oversized Morehouse sweatshirt she'd slept in, her hair wrapped in a scarf that had seen better years. Her two daughters, Sola, 7, and baby Temi, not yet 4, were eating cereal at a folding table that wobbled every time Temi bumped it with her knee, which was every 30 seconds. The envelope had her ex-husband's law firm's return address in the corner. Obiajulu and Associates, LLC, Atlanta, Georgia. She set it down, made herself drink her coffee first. Then she opened it. It was an invitation. Not just any invitation. A cream cardstock invitation with gold foil lettering and a ribbon, the kind that cost more per envelope than Nneka spent on groceries in a week. Emeka Obiajulu and Miss Tiffany Graves request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration. Saturday the 14th, the Ritz-Carlton, Buckhead. And then, handwritten at the bottom, Emeka's handwriting, she'd recognize it anywhere, loopy and confident, and slightly too large for the page, a note. I hope you'll come, Nneka. The girls are welcome too. I think it's important they see what a real celebration looks like. She read it twice. Then she folded it carefully back into the envelope, walked to the bathroom, turned on the shower so her daughters wouldn't hear her, and stood over the sink and cried until she couldn't anymore. Then she stopped, washed her face, walked back to the kitchen. "Mama, Temi spilled the milk," Sola announced. "I know, baby," Nneka said. "I'll get it." And she did. Here is what you need to understand about Nneka Obiajulu. Nneka Adeyemi now. She'd taken her maiden name back the week the divorce was finalized. Before any of the rest of this makes sense. She had not always lived in her sister Funke's second bedroom with 2 children and a sewing machine she'd bought off Facebook Marketplace for $65. 3 years earlier, she had a house in Sandy Springs. A 4-bedroom colonial with a wraparound porch and a kitchen with marble countertops and a KitchenAid mixer in matte black that she'd asked for as a birthday gift and never actually used because Emeka didn't like her spending time on hobby stuff. She had a Honda Pilot, forest green. She had a Costco membership and a gym membership and a neighborhood book club she attended twice before Emeka said the women in it were small-minded. She had, she thought, a marriage. What she actually had was Emeka's idea of a wife. Emeka Obiajulu was handsome in the way that made people trust him automatically, which was, Nneka had come to understand, the most dangerous kind of handsome. He was tall, he had his father's cheekbones, and he wore his suits like he'd been born in them. He was the founding partner of a boutique immigration law firm that was, by the time they married, beginning to become something. He was respected. He was charming at dinner parties. He remembered people's names, their spouses' names, their children's names. He sent handwritten thank you notes. In private, he was a different architecture. He didn't yell, exactly. He was too controlled for yelling. But there were comments. About Nneka's cooking. "You know my mother made jollof with fresh tomatoes, not canned." About her clothes. "That color makes you look tired." About the sewing she'd done since she was 12 years old, taught by her grandmother in Lagos. The same grandmother who could produce a wedding dress from scratch, with nothing but a hand-drawn sketch and 3 yards of lace. I don't understand why you waste time on that when you could be focusing on the children. About the Etsy shop she'd opened quietly, listing hand-sewn children's dresses with smocked fronts and embroidered hems, the kind her grandmother had made for her. "Nneka, be serious. You're a lawyer's wife. You're not a seamstress." She closed the shop. She told herself it was the right thing, that she was building something real, a family, a life, that the small erosions didn't matter. They always matter. You just don't know it until you're standing in your sister's bathroom at 7 in the morning, crying over an invitation. The divorce had been Emeka's idea. Nneka had not been surprised exactly, but she had been unprepared. He'd sat her down one Sunday after church, still in his suit, and explained it the way he might explain a billing dispute. Calmly, methodically, with an itemized list of grievances. She wasn't growing with him. She was comfortable in smallness. He needed a partner who matched his energy, his ambition. He said the word trisaptal 3 times. She did not fight it. She had nothing left to fight with. The settlement was what it was. Emeka's lawyer was, naturally, Emeka. He'd found her a decent enough attorney, but the math was the math. And the math said that Nneka walked away with the girls, child support of $400 a month per child, and a grace period of 60 days in the Sandy Springs house before she had to vacate. She packed her clothes, her daughter's clothes, her sewing machine, the old one, the one from before, the good singer that had been her grandmother's, and still worked, and she moved into Funky's second bedroom in Decatur, and she tried to figure out what came next. Funky worked nights as a hospital administrator. They crossed paths in the mornings, mostly Funky coming in as Nneka was getting the girls up. They didn't talk much about what had happened. Funky had never liked Emeka, had said so once, and been told politely but firmly never to say it again, and now she said nothing because she didn't have to. What Nneka had in that second bedroom was time. Sola was in 2nd grade. Temi was in pre-K. The girls were gone from 8 to 3, and Nneka had those 7 hours and the sewing machine and nothing else pressing, and one morning, without quite deciding to, she sat down and she started to sew. She made a dress first. A little smocked cotton dress with sunflowers, the same pattern her grandmother had taught her. The same French seams and hand-stitched details that took twice as long as a machine could do, but held 3 times better. She made it in Temi's size, yellow with white piping, and Temi put it on and wore it to pre-K, and 3 different mothers stopped Nneka at pickup to ask where it came from. She made 2 more, put them on Etsy. They sold within 48 hours. She made 5 more. She remade the shop, Nneka's workshop, she called it. Nothing fancy, just her name and the word that was true. She priced the dresses the way she'd always been afraid to price them before. $95 for a smocked dress. $140 for anything with embroidery. She expected people to push back. Nobody pushed back. They bought. By month 3, she was sewing until midnight. By month 5, she'd had to turn down orders because she couldn't make them fast enough alone. By month 7, she hired her neighbor's college-age daughter, Lola, to come help 3 days a week, and she moved the operation from the 2nd bedroom to the garage Funky didn't use, and she bought a 2nd machine, a proper industrial juki that cost $900 and made her heart pound to spend, but was worth every cent. She did not tell Emeka. He sent the child support checks on the 1st of the month, always exactly on time, which was, she thought, its own kind of statement. Exact compliance, nothing extra. She didn't ask for extra. She didn't tell anyone, really. She just worked. And then the invitation came. Now, here is where you need to pay attention. Because what Nneka did next, most people would not do. And the ones who say they would do it, most of them are wrong. She called her friend Remy, who had been her best friend since Howard University, who was now a corporate attorney in Charlotte, and who Nneka knew would give her an honest answer, even when the honest answer was uncomfortable. "He sent you an invitation to the wedding," Remy said. "He did, with a note, a handwritten note." There was a pause on the line. Remy had a particular kind of silence for things she was processing carefully before she spoke. "What does the note say, exactly?" Nneka read it to her. Another silence. "He wants you to see him marry someone else," Remy said, "and he wants your daughters to watch. That's how I read it." "Nneka, baby. This man wants to humiliate you. I know. Then I don't understand the phone call. I'm thinking about going. Absolutely not. Remy Nneka, I love you. No. She didn't go to sleep until 2 in the morning. She lay in the dark with Temmie warm against her side. Her younger daughter had started coming into her bed some nights. Not every night, just the nights she sensed something was different. And children always sense these things. And she looked at the ceiling, and she thought about it. The thing was, she had changed. Not in the way you say you've changed when you want to sound healed and Instagram ready. In the actual molecular way. She was not the same woman who had stood in that kitchen, in Sandy Springs, letting Emeka's comments settle over her like sediment. She had spent the last 14 months waking up at 5:30 in the morning and sitting at a sewing machine before her children needed her and building something that was entirely, completely, irrevocably hers. Nobody had invested in it. Nobody had believed in it. Nobody had even known about it. She had built it in a garage in Decatur in the in-between hours. She had a right to know what she was now, and she wanted Emeka to know too. She RSVP'd yes. Here is what she did not know yet. 3 weeks before the wedding, on a Thursday afternoon when she was sitting in the garage, hemming the waistband on a flower girl dress that a woman in Nashville had ordered for her daughter's wedding, one of the specialty pieces. $180, pale pink Dupioni silk with hand-embroidered vines, a car pulled up to the curb. Not an unusual car from the outside. A Camry, a few years old, silver. The kind of car that disappears in a parking lot. The man who got out was tall, clean-shaven. He wore a simple linen shirt and dark pants, and had the kind of face that didn't announce itself, but that you kept looking at. He checked the address on his phone, looked at the house, looked at the address again. The garage door was open because it was April, and the Atlanta heat hadn't become unbearable yet, and Nneka liked the light. He saw her before she saw him. "Excuse me," he said. She looked up. "Yes? Is this? Sorry, I was looking at a listing on Etsy. There was a location listed as Decatur. I know that's unusual." He seemed aware of how this sounded. "I was in the neighborhood and I realized I should have just ordered online. I don't know why He stopped. "Stopped? I'm sorry. I saw a dress on your shop." A yo-yo one. For a little girl. My niece is turning 5 next month, and I've been trying to find something that reminded me of the ones my mother used to make when I was growing up in Accra. The smocking. I haven't been able to find anything like it in stores. Nneka put down the silk. "You're from Accra?" "Originally." He had a slight accent she hadn't clocked at first. Educated. Worn down by years in America to something soft. "I've been in Houston for the last 12 years. What brings you to Atlanta?" "Business." He said it the way people say things when the answer is more complicated than they want to get into. She showed him the yellow dress, and then she showed him 3 others she had in finished inventory, and he asked questions about the smocking technique, about the thread count, about whether she could do a specific ivory color that his mother would have used. And somewhere around the 2nd or 3rd question, she stopped thinking of him as a customer and started thinking of him as someone she was actually talking to. His name was Tobias Mensah. He bought the yellow dress and the ivory one. He gave her his email for the custom order. He thanked her twice, once for the dresses and once, which she didn't know what to do with, for keeping this craft alive. "My mother would love you." He left. The Camry pulled away. She went back to her hemming. She did not think, how could she, that Tobias Mensah was in fact the kind of man whose name appeared in the business section of the Houston Chronicle with some regularity. She did not know that the Camry was something he drove specifically when he didn't want to deal with the attention that came with other vehicles. She did not know that his company a construction and real estate development firm he'd founded at 29 with $100,000, borrowed from 3 relatives, and his own saved salary, was now valued in a range that had 7 figures before the decimal point and more zeros after it than she would have found comfortable to count. He hadn't said any of that. He'd asked about smocking thread. She thought about him briefly the next day, and then set the thought aside because she had a business to run, and 2 daughters to raise, and an ex-husband's wedding to attend in 11 days. She wore the color of ripe mango. It was a dress she'd made herself. Of course it was. She wasn't going to spend money she didn't have on a dress for this, and besides, no store was going to give her exactly what she needed, which was armor that didn't look like armor, structured silk blend, a burnt orange that in certain light went almost golden, with a neckline that was modest but precise, and a silhouette that said, "I spent exactly 0 mornings crying over you without saying a word." She'd spent 2 weeks on it in the late evenings after the girls went to sleep. Her friend Remy had come down from Charlotte. That had not been the plan, but Remy had called on Thursday and said, "I changed my mind about the wedding. I'm coming. You're not walking into that place alone." And Nneka had been so relieved she'd had to pretend to sneeze to cover it. They arrived 20 minutes late, which was calculated. Early meant you were eager. On time meant you cared. 20 minutes late meant you'd had better things to do. The Ritz-Carlton Buckhead in full wedding setup was, she could admit, impressive. Cream florals, candlelight, a string quartet in the lobby that pivoted seamlessly from Beethoven to a slow jazz interpretation of an Afrobeat song when they walked in, which she had to admit was a nice touch. There were people everywhere, all of them dressed, all of them glancing toward the door when newcomers arrived in the practiced casual way that meant they were very much paying attention to who came in. Emeka saw her from across the room. She watched his face do something complicated. He'd expected something, that was clear. He'd expected, perhaps, the woman who had left Sandy Springs with a minivan and a sewing machine. He had not expected the mango dress. He had not expected Remy, who was 6 feet tall in heels and had the posture of someone who wins arguments for a living. And he had not expected what happened 11 minutes after they walked in. A car arrived outside, a black Escalade, but not just one, 3 of them, sequential, which was the kind of arrival that made the valets straighten up and the guests near the entrance drift casually closer. The hotel's automatic doors opened, and a man walked through in a charcoal suit so perfectly fitted it could only have been made by a person who cared about the work, and behind him, 2 men who were clearly not guests in the celebrating sense. And beside him, Nneka. No, not yet, stay with the sequence, because here is what had happened 3 days before the wedding. Tobias Mensah had emailed her, not about the custom order. He had finished the message with the custom order details. Ivory, smocking at the yoke. Could she do a ribbon sash? And then, after a clear paragraph break that she imagined had taken him a moment to decide on, he had written, "I want to ask you something, and I hope this isn't out of place. I looked up your shop again. I read the reviews. I saw what people say about your work. And I've been thinking about what you said when I came by, that you've been doing this alone for over a year. I run a small investment portfolio on the side of my main business. I'd like to have a conversation if you're open to it. Not a pitch, just a conversation." She had stared at this email for a long time. Then she had forwarded it to Remy, who called her 45 seconds later and said, "Nneka, I need you to reply to this man before you overthink yourself out of the best thing that's happened to you since Temmie learns to sleep through the night." She replied. They met at a coffee shop in Midtown on Wednesday afternoon. Tobias came alone, no laptop, just a legal pad and a pen. He asked her questions for 2 hours. Not about her story, not about the divorce, not about the circumstances. About her work, about her techniques, her sourcing, her timeline per piece, her capacity if she had more hands, about what she would do if she had capital and space and time, about where she saw the brand in 5 years. Nobody had ever asked her these questions. In the whole of her adult life, nobody had sat across from her and asked her what she would do if she had the room to grow. She answered every single question. At the end, Tobias had looked at his legal pad and then looked at her and said, "You have something real. You know that, right? This isn't hobby work." She had kept her voice very even when she responded, "I know." She had driven home and gone straight into the garage and sat at the sewing machine and cried for about 4 minutes. Then she'd turned the machine on and kept working. On Friday, one day before the wedding, Tobias had asked, in another email, whether she had any events coming up. He was going to be in Atlanta through the weekend, and he enjoyed seeing the city properly, which I never get to do when I'm here for work. She'd told him, without entirely meaning to, about the wedding, who had sent the invitation and why. He had been quiet for a moment on the phone. Then, "Would it be strange if I came with you?" "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." "Would it be strange?" She had thought about this. "No," she said. "It wouldn't be strange." So, the doors opened, and Tobias walked through, and Nneka was beside him. If you are wondering whether the room noticed, of course the room noticed. The room noticed the way rooms notice gravity. The escalades, the men flanking them at a respectful distance. The suit, the woman in the mango dress who moved like she'd been expecting this room to look at her. Emeka's mother saw them first. Nneka watched the older woman's eyes travel from her face to Tobias's face, to the configuration of the whole situation, and saw something shift there that wasn't quite joy. Emeka himself crossed the room toward her inside of 60 seconds. She had to give him credit for the speed of the recovery. He was smiling. He had the champagne glass in hand. He was performing welcome. "Nneka," he said. "You look well." "I am well," she said. "Emeka, this is Tobias." The handshake between men communicates more than either one is saying. Nneka had learned to read this fluently after years of Emeka's firm grip political handshakes at networking events. What she watched happen between Emeka and Tobias was brief and complete, and told her everything. "Great to meet you," Emeka said. "A half second too fast." "Likewise," Tobias said. "That's all." There was a woman at Emeka's elbow who was presumably Tiffany, tall, light-skinned, wearing a rehearsal dinner-style dress that was clearly expensive and clearly chosen to signal that she was secure enough to not need to try too hard. She had natural hair in a low puff and diamond earrings and the expression of someone trying to understand a situation very quickly. She looked at Nneka. She looked at Tobias. She looked at Emeka. Then she looked at Nneka again. And what Nneka saw in the woman's face was not the hostility she'd expected. It was something closer to assessment, calculation, the look of a smart woman doing math. Tiffany leaned toward Emeka and said something low, and Emeka said something back, and then Tiffany said, clearly enough for Nneka to hear, which Nneka would think about later and believe was intentional. "Baby, why did you invite her?" Not, "Why did she come?" "Why did you invite her?" "It's fine," he said. "She's here, it's fine." "I'm not asking if it's fine, I'm asking why. This is the moment that changes everything, not the arrival. Not the suits, not the escalades. This one sentence from a woman who had decided she was going to think for herself tonight. Nneka stepped forward slightly, not toward Emeka, toward Tiffany. "You don't have to be uncomfortable," Nneka said. "Quiet, genuine. I'm not here to cause a scene. I'm here because..." She paused. "Let the true answer surface. Because I spent 3 years making myself small for this man, and I needed to stand somewhere he would see me and know that I'm not small anymore. That's all. That's all this is." Tiffany looked at her for a long time. Then she said, "And this is not what Nneka expected. This is not what anyone expected. How long ago did you leave?" "About 14 months. Tiffany nodded slowly, the nodding of someone arriving at a conclusion. "And he invited you here." "He did, to show you what you were missing. That's my read." Tiffany nodded one more time. Then she picked up her champagne glass, looked at it, looked at Emeka, and said, "I need some air." She walked toward the terrace, alone. She did not come back for 45 minutes. When she did, she came back changed. Nneka didn't know what she'd thought about on that terrace, but whatever it was had rearranged something in her. She came and found Nneka near the dessert table and said, simply, "He told me you two just grew apart. Mutual. No fault." "Okay," Nneka said. "That's not what happened." "No, it's not." Another pause. "Is that man you came with a friend?" Nneka didn't hesitate. "A new one, but a real one." Tiffany looked across the room to where Tobias was standing with Remy, the two of them in what appeared to be a surprisingly animated conversation about something. She almost smiled. "He seems like a real one." "He is." Tiffany set her champagne glass down on the table. She squared her shoulders in the particular way of women who have just decided something they won't walk back from. "I have a cousin," she said, "who told me before tonight that a man who shows you how he treats the last woman he loved will show you how he'll treat you." She looked at Nneka directly. She was right, wasn't she? Nneka did not answer because she did not have to. Tiffany already knew. The wedding did not happen that night. Not because of a scene, not because of a confrontation, not because of anything dramatic, in the way people might want to tell it later. It just dissolved. Tiffany had a quiet conversation with her mother. Then, the mother had a quiet conversation with the wedding planner. Guests began to sense it, the way you sense weather before it arrives. By 9 o'clock, the Ritz-Carlton was mostly just a very expensive room, full of confused people, with nowhere specific to be. Emeka found Nneka once more, near the coat check, as she was leaving. His face had done the thing it did when he was managing something he hadn't expected to have to manage. "I hope you're happy," he said, and he meant it as a wound. Nneka considered this. "I am, actually," she said. "I really, truly am." She left with Tobias and Remy and did not look back, because there was nothing back there that she needed to see. The investment came through 6 weeks later. Not just money, structure. Tobias connected her with a woman in Houston who ran a luxury children's brand and had been looking for a manufacturing partner for a hand-sewn artisan line. He connected her with a business attorney who specialized in IP protection for fashion brands. He helped her see that what she had was not a small shop that needed to grow, but a brand that needed framing, and that those were different problems with different solutions. She moved out of Funke's second bedroom and into a rental house in East Atlanta, 3 bedrooms, a real backyard for the girls, and a detached studio in the back that became the official home of Nneka's workshop. She hired 3 seamstresses by spring. She launched a bridal accessories line in June. Sola, who was 8 by then, came into the studio one Saturday morning and stood in the doorway watching her mother work, watching the 3 women at the tables, watching the dress forms draped in silk and cotton and one show-stopping bolt of Ankara that they were testing for a new kids' collection. And she said, "Mama, are we rich now?" Nneka set down her shears. "Baby," she said, and she meant every single syllable of it. "We were always going to be. Now we need to ask you something before you go." Emeka had all the resources, all the connections. He built his career in part on the story of the woman he'd left behind. He talked in networking circles about having made the hard choice to move forward, which is the way people describe leaving when they want it to sound like growth. But he lost the Sandy Springs house to a refinancing decision that didn't go his way. He lost Tiffany, She called off everything that night, and later, Nneka heard moved to Seattle and started over. He lost the version of himself that could look at Nneka Adeyemi and see smallness, because she was never small. He just needed the room to be dark enough that he couldn't see what she was. And Tobias, if you're wondering, yes, they had dinner. Several. The kind where you close the restaurant without meaning to. The kind where you look up and it's midnight and you haven't noticed. But that's a different story for a different day. What we want to know from you right now is this. Have you ever been told you were too small for something you later proved was made for you? Tell us below, and if this story found you at the right moment, you know what to do. Subscribe so the next one finds you too.